I think it was the first time I had a pour over. I was like, you weigh that? Wow. This is incredible. I didn't even know this coffee could taste like this.
This is Sarah. Sarah's talking about the first time she went to one of the highest quality cafes in all of North Carolina, a coffee shop called Waking Life. Waking Life would eventually be featured in the New York Times and in countries as far away as New Zealand. But it wasn't because the coffee was great. Rather, it's because eventually Waking Life would hurt many, many women in the Asheville community. Here's a quick primer on the kind of place that Asheville is. Asheville is a liberal city of about 100,000 people, nestled into the Appalachian mountain range. If you wander down the high street, you'll find stores selling 100 different wind chimes. And there's a fortune-telling machine.
What are you waiting for? Come on over. Zoltar will give you a wealth of wisdom.
And there's even a piano in the airport. I'm James Harper, and this is Filter Stories, the untold stories hidden in your cup of coffee. Okay, let's get into the story. The year is 2012, and Sarah is a university student in Asheville.
And started actually going into Waking Life to study. And I remember talking with the only owner at the time,
A guy called Jared.
about how I was wanting to get more into the coffee side of things because that was really my passion. At one point, he said, well, why don't you send me your resume? And I did. And then I remember getting a call back like months later. And I was like, yes, I got the Waking Life job. And I was very excited about it.
Because what did it mean for you?
It meant that I could figure out a way into specialty coffee.
Sarah now begins to work part-time for Jared at Waking Life. Do you remember your first day?
Yes, I do, actually. I remember I was working with Jared on my first day. I remember just being very wowed because my previous coffee knowledge was you press a button and the coffee comes out.
What were your first impressions of Jared?
I mean, he seemed very in love with coffee and very excited about coffee and passionate about it. And I think that's what made me really excited to see an owner that was working behind a bar that was really excited about what they were serving.
Sarah starts working at Waking Life at an interesting juncture in Jared's life.
When I first came on, I remember Jared being very clearly like someone who had just come out of Christianity, like a lot of Christianity, and being like, I'm not super religious anymore, and I'm finding my own self outside of religion in the South, and him like often trying to have intellectual conversations.
Let's fast forward a bit to July 2014. Jared starts a blog called Holistic Game. Here are a few sentences from his first blog post. Greetings. You are perhaps reading this because you have stumbled about the manosphere, quote unquote, looking for answers to your personal and romantic woes. A bit about me. I'm a young man in the twilight of his third decade on this planet. I lost my virginity at age 24 and, until the past year, struggled mightily when interacting with women. Around this time, Sarah begins to notice that something has changed with her boss, Jared.
We used to have some in passing intellectual conversations when I first started working there, and then as time progressed, there was a like more of a distance between me and him, and not only me and him, but I think like everyone that worked there and him.
And do you remember Jacob in the cafe?
So Jacob came along maybe a year and a half into me working there, and then I remember maybe a weeks or months later found out that he was going to be a business partner in Waking Life.
Sarah now has two bosses, Jared and Jacob.
And then once Jacob came on, it was a very clear change where they were like almost us against the world sometimes.
Jared and Jacob, now business partners, also become partners on Jared's Holistic Game blog. They have stumbled into the Red Pill community. This is a community of men who call themselves pickup artists, and they invest time learning how to be more effective convincing women to have sex with them. And red pill pickup artists are a special breed of pickup artist. They believe Western women will more readily offer sex to alpha dominant men when they are younger. And then, if and when the time comes to start a family, women will choose more submissive and loyal beta men. So, in a nutshell, the owners of Waking Life, Jared and Jacob, try to develop strategies to appear more like dominant alpha men in the hope of having sex with more women. I did get hold of Jared for this story, but he politely declined my interview request, and I wasn't able to get in touch with Jacob.
I've never looked at porn in my life.
Yeah, me neither. Welcome to the Holistic Game Podcast, number 3.
Numero tres.
With J&J. Before we start, I need to correct...
Jared and Jacob also begin a podcast where they talk about red pill strategies for an online community of pickup artists. They anonymize themselves by referring to one another as Big J and Little J.
I was getting what called the next day.
Jay called?
Fuck.
Get my name right. We're trying to keep it anonymous. Jesus Christ.
Trying to. Anyway.
Nobody in Nashville knows that the Holistic Game Podcast is out on the internet. Unless, of course, they're a part of the pickup artist community. And even if you knew the podcast existed, you wouldn't know the identities of J and J, or even where in America it's being recorded.
Maybe.
Right? Yeah, there was a little bit of profit from it. She was a plate. It was a person to have sex with once a week. So like say in the beginning you were putting in 2 units, drop down to putting in half a unit. You know, like just call her once a week, have her over, like tell her to come over at like 9. You know,
right.
Like get her to come over, fuck her, and then be like, hey, it was good to see you, or whatever. Cut it off short, you know?
And all the while, Sarah is working at Waking Life. She, like everybody else in the community, does not know that Jared and Jacob, her bosses, are the men behind the podcast.
When I look back on it in my first year, especially what made me want to keep going there every single day was my customers. And, a lot of the same people came every single day. They became your best friends, it felt like. This one time them just being like, hey, how is your day going? You look a little off or something, and being like, that's actually what I needed.
And we talked about this the first podcast. It was like every girl that came in our business, I was just like, I just all over it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some of these girls that just nowadays, I'm like, that girl I would never touch. Mm-hmm. Back then, I was like, I would just want to drag that girl in the bathroom. You know what I mean?
Sarah begins seeing more of a change with how her bosses, Jared and Jacob, are interacting with their customers.
You started to see some boundaries crossed where you were like, I don't really like the way you just talked about the customer, or I don't really like the way that you went out and it almost seemed like you were bothering them. But I remember it clearly being like, I think that person's trying to get work done and you look like you might be annoying them.
I'm imagining someone on a laptop typing away, yes, with a head cocked to the right, kind of talking.
Yes, totally. Uh-huh. And sometimes being like, okay, I'm still typing. Okay, you're still there. Okay, I'm still typing.
But if you can tell that a guy that's making fun of you is insecure, it's very easy to just turn the table and be like, how many times are you having sex a week? How's that going for you? Or especially if you're with a bunch of guys and they're like, oh, you're gonna be alone forever, aren't you?
Right.
Like, it's so easy to just become the champion in that room.
Right.
Because you're doing what everybody else wants to be doing.
Right.
So just call it out. It's easy.
Yeah, exactly. But how much you getting laid? Once a month?
Cool.
Thumbs up.
I slept with 5 women last week. That was cool.
It was real cool.
When did you meet Lindsay?
I met Lindsay because I would go back to Charlotte pretty regularly.
Lindsay is the owner of a pop-up cafe in Charlotte called The Daily Press.
And so I went in and her menu was incredible. She had 5 signature beverages on. And she was doing coffee like I hadn't seen anyone else do coffee in North Carolina. And it was, especially seeing a woman do it, it was super exciting. Because at the time, pretty much everyone in coffee that I had been exposed to that was an owner or was a man.
And over time, Sarah gets to know Lindsay better because she does more and more guest barista shifts at Lindsay's Cafe in Charlotte. And speaking of Lindsay, here she is. So when you opened the Daily Press, what's the story there?
I wanted to have a little bit more equality in the shop. There's a tendency for mustachioed white males to have an advantage over women. And despite the fact that I had been working so many years in coffee and working very hard to go above and beyond the bromance between owner and employee, it would overshadow my work. I wanted to create a space that didn't operate like that.
What was the reputation that Waking Life had at the time?
I just remember them being well respected in the coffee world. It had won best coffee shop in North Carolina. I just remember kind of thinking at the time, shucks, I wish we had gotten that.
I hear that the coffee was excellent at Lindsay's Cafe, but compared to Waking Life's clean and minimalist decor, Lindsay's Cafe could not have been more different.
It wasn't a dark, dirty pub, and it was awful at the time. I would come in and our equipment would be broken because the music venue the night before, and I'd have to come in and clean up vomit from the show and beer cans, and it was a passion project. And if I weren't so passionate about coffee, I would have died inside.
Part of it is like, man, women, step it up. Like, be better. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, be interesting. Like, read something interesting. Like, Jesus.
Be passionate about something.
Yeah, like have an interest or a hobby or, something that makes like us men go, what? That's really cool.
Also in 2014, Sarah graduates from university. So at that point, how did your hours change at Waking Life?
When I graduated, I went rapidly from working like 2 to 3 shifts a week to 5 shifts a week. I had planned on going to grad school and getting my PhD in sociology, and I saw myself going the academic route. But I fell in love with this community. I fell in love with Asheville, and I couldn't see myself anywhere else.
Sarah is now working full-time at Waking Life. A little while later, Waking Life is doing so well that Jared and Jacob begin to expand. They find a downtown location, and they now plan to have 2 shops.
Momentous decisions.
Stressful decisions. I guess those usually go hand in hand.
Stressful business decision. $100,000. And
So-
we were talking, of course, about
Maybe that's
expanding
a-
our latex suit, our dominatrix latex suit business,
Yeah.
which is what we do.
The new factory is
Right.
what we're talking about.
Right, with
Lots of hot rubber.
huge cutouts for dongs.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
This is why we're so good with women. We just give them a tour of the factory and all the toys, and
right.
there it is. Just ripe for the picking. That's part of the tour,
You want
lady.
to try this suit on for me, baby girl? Oh,
Put this on and bend over.
Oh, ma.
Oh.
Well, I haven't gotten any new notches since last time. Have you? I don't think you have either.
No new notches.
By now, the Holistic Game podcast has over 20 episodes, and the blog has made many references to people that Jared and Jacob slept with. Asheville's not a big city, about 100,000 people. If anyone ever finds out who they are and makes their identities public, it wouldn't take much for the Asheville community to figure out which specific women in the community Jared and Jacob were referencing. And then, in August 2015, an anonymous blog comes out that de-anonymizes Holistic Game and attributes the podcast and the blogs directly to Jared and Jacob. And for context, Me Too has not taken off yet. This is 6 months before Brock Turner and 2 years before Weinstein. These revelations slowly start to circulate in the Asheville community. And at one point, Emily, who is the owner of a local news website, receives an email.
My husband and I, we buy and sell, retro video games. And so we were actually, in the middle of selling stuff at the flea market, and I got this email on my phone. So it was I need to listen to this right now. I need to figure out, and I need to go and find an interview of Jared speaking online to compare the voice to like confirm that this is what it seems to be. It was a multifaceted social media branding campaign. It was just so damning. And, you know, the media struggles to find documentation for stories like this. So just to have it all laid out was just crazy, for lack of a better word.
What happened when you press publish?
Oh, God. Instant implosion. I mean, we're sitting in a car talking about it 3 years later, you know? So, you know, especially for like my little website, I was like, hey, I'm getting 30,000 hits a month. I'm killing it. And then I released the story and oh my God, 10,000 hits an hour. Holy crap. I think I had got like 1 million hits that month.
This story is the equivalent of a wildfire. On a Friday afternoon in September, Sarah is working one of her shifts at Waking Life. And it's then that she finds out what her bosses have been up to.
I was at work and I looked at my phone and I just had text after text after text. I was feeling really overwhelmed because I'd already been really busy at work and I was like, I don't know what I'm reading. I'm really confused. Like, is this a joke? Wait, what is this? And then you get like deeper and deeper into it and you're like, oh my gosh.
Here's Emily again, the local news blogger who broke the story.
There was a protest like that day. You know, they were just like, it was women that had read it that were like, this is not okay. And they just made up some signs and stood peacefully in front of the coffee shop, and the coffee shop closed early that day. Yeah, it was very effective.
What was it about the story that resonated so strongly?
Like, they weren't viewing women as human beings. They were calling them plates. Saying boys will be boys, this is just what men do, is giving leeway to any man that has acted in a predatory manner.
Sarah is now back at home and she's listening to her boss's podcast and reading their blog.
There was just so many comments that I mean, they made me cry. I was just like, I don't know how you could think this about a human, another human. Didn't want any woman that I know or any woman in general to be referred to as a plate or thought of as a plate. And I remember making the decision that I couldn't go back after reading what I read. There was no way. And so I let them know that I, was going to go ahead and put in my notice and drafted an email and sent it in. When I quit, I had no notice. And I feel like, most jobs you leave, you have at least 2 weeks of saying, oh, it's my last day. Let me say goodbye to you or whatever it is. I worked my last shift not knowing it was my last shift and had absolutely no closure with any of my customers.
It wasn't just that you were quitting a job. You were quitting a community that you had been such a part of.
Yes. I mean, thankfully, some of them I had their numbers and could reach out to them. But my first thought were, the older people that I made coffee for every day that I didn't have their numbers. And they become my favorite part of my morning that I didn't know how to contact them. I couldn't find them on Facebook or, And so you go through this whole list of people that you're going to miss.
And then what happened after that?
There was another protest.
Here's Emily again, the local news blogger who broke the story.
More organized protest. Yeah, it was instantaneous pushback from the community about what was going on. But in a very respectful manner, honestly, all things considered. It was very respectful and nonviolent.
Jared and Jacob published many apologies. There's a company apology and also personal apologies. I asked Sarah what she thinks of her now ex-boss's apologies.
Words. I remember just being like, I don't even think you could say any words right now that would make me feel any type of way about you, except for I'm still feeling angry. And I think everyone's still feeling angry. I don't know. There was so many interviews that happened afterwards and the apologies and stuff where I just didn't feel like they totally understood why what happened. And I think a lot of people felt that way.
The main Waking Life cafe that Sarah works at is sold at a fire sale to another cafe that had been looking to expand west. The second downtown cafe that they were in the middle of building falls through. Waking Life had been operating for 7 years, and in 7 days, it was clear they were out of business. Sarah is now trying to figure out what to do next.
I'm here at my house for days and days and days on my computer trying to figure out what my next step was. You know, the thought came to me, and I had people reach out to me saying, you know, hey, if you want support in whatever it is, if you want to open up a cafe, let us know and we'll help you do it. And anytime you make a big decision, it's really scary. This is earlier than I thought it was going to be, but I'm going to do this.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Earlier, how old were you?
23. And I knew that I didn't want to do it alone. And Lindsay was the first person to reach out to me when everything happened, saying, hey, if you quit, you can come down here and work some shifts to make some money. And I was like, I want to go to Charlotte and talk to Lindsay. And then I went down, and I remember asking her if she would sit down and talk to me for a little bit. And I, like, nervously / was very overcaffeinated, said, I've been wanting to do this, blah, blah, blah. Do you want to do this with me? And I remember her being like,
Let's do it. I don't even think we discussed it for more than a minute before we were like, we're opening a shop in Asheville.
and she was so excited, and it seemed like she was just ready to do it.
She wanted to create a safe space and to continue serving coffee to Asheville. And so then we were on the computer just trying to figure out how we could make it a viable plan.
Initially, we were trying to get the location that Waking Life was going to go into downtown.
Sarah and Lindsay set up a meeting with Jared and Jacob to see if they can take over the half-finished downtown space. What was that meeting like?
Looking at Jacob, he just looked like he just wanted to collapse inside of himself. I think Jared was more, we're here to discuss this. Let's just discuss it.
Sarah and Lindsay also set up a meeting with the estate agent.
He didn't take us seriously at all, didn't want to show us the space, was frustrated with us because we were 4 minutes early to look at the space.
And the guy says, well, I just want you to know that we have to have a professional business in here.
We aren't going to rent this space to people who are going to put women or female power in the windows.
And me and Lindsay looked at each other.
We're just like, that wasn't our intention. We were just opening a coffee shop. You know, we have credentials. If you want to see this functioning business that exists in Charlotte.
And I remember Lindsay pulling out a copy of Barista Magazine that she had in her bag.
You know, we'd been in Barista Magazine before. We're not just random naive individuals.
It was quite shocking.
That was a traumatic experience for Sarah because it went from dealing with this misogynistic owners to seeing misogynistic landlords. I know her spirit was a little bit crushed.
I already felt like, I want to make this space a better space than it was going to be, but that just completely killed it for me. So I was actually driving at some point and saw a very small for rent sign. And so I call in and make an appointment to go see it. And Lindsay's back in Charlotte, so I go by myself and walk in, and the person showing us the space is actually one of my former customers. Oh, I've been making you coffee for a while. This feels good. This feels right. And it took us like a week to get the keys to the space that we're in now.
When did you open?
We opened in 2016.
The new cafe is called Trade and Lore. What was that first day like?
It was really emotional because there was customers that I hadn't seen in months. There was one particular older couple, that I loved very, very much. And I was so worried I would never see them again just because I didn't know how to get in contact with them. And maybe 6 months into being open, they walked through the door and I just started sobbing because I was like, I didn't think I was going to ever see you again. And it fills my heart so much to have you in this new space. that's my story of it. Yeah, but I'm happy to still be in Asheville and doing what I love in a community that I love.
Thank you for listening to the first ever episode of Filter Stories. This episode took me over 100 hours of work. I traveled to Asheville and conducted so many interviews with members of the community. And within those stories, there are so many fascinating themes. And unfortunately, we just didn't have time to go into them in this podcast. But I am putting together all these fascinating side stories, and I will release them at some point in the near future on the Filter Stories Patreon page. So at this point, maybe you're wondering, well, who is Filter Stories? Well, you're listening to him. It's just me. And this is currently my full-time job, even though I'm not getting paid for this. I started Filter Stories because, I worked in coffee for a long time, and I came across so many incredible personal stories that revealed to me the surprising realities of the coffee world. Now, when I left my last job, I could have gone back to a corporate life and sell widgets in a grey suit. But instead, I chose to follow my passion for great storytelling, to share these fascinating stories with you. And I would love to get more diverse stories and to make them even more frequently. But for this, I need you. We need more people listening to keep this going. If you'd like to help, tell your friends. 2 of them. Tell 2 of your friends. Word of mouth is the best way we can both grow this. If you'd like to, please also write a review on iTunes and share this episode on Twitter or Instagram. Every new listener will make a big difference. I have 3 more episodes to share with you between now and October. And now, a few people I need to thank for the episode. The awesome Filter Stories logo was created by Headquarters, a branding and packaging design team. Check out Headquarters' other stuff on their website, www.headquarters.studio. And a big thanks to Ashley Rodriguez of the Boss Barista podcast for helping me find this story. If you're interested in deconstructing the patriarchy and hearing underrepresented female voices in specialty coffee, you will love the Boss Barista podcast. Now, there are a few people in Asheville that I want to thank for both offering me their time and trusting me with the story. Sarah Winkler and Lindsay Pittman of Trade and Lore, Emily Trimnell of the Asheville blog, Kristen and Ross Britton of Izzy's Coffee House, Ella Eminopi, Corey Thompson, Tony Sherwood, Avery from Liberty Coffee House, Trey Crispin, Aaron Durham, and Jay Weatherly of High Five Coffee. And a big thank you to the people who provided editorial feedback on drafts of the show. Larato Mapagnani, Heather Simons, Christian Ladiviere, Sina Ural, Amy O'Brien, Pia Klein, and Jenna Kerndl. I produced and edited this story and wrote and performed the piano music. Do you have story ideas for me? Please email me at hello@filterstories.org. You can follow Filter Stories on Instagram @FilterStoriesPodcast and sign up to the newsletter. You'll find it on the website, filterstories.org.